Namaste. My name is Preity Upala, and I am a global thought leader and a multimedia personality. Welcome to my podcast, The Preity Experience. Join me as I explore some of the most fascinating and crucial issues that affect our world today. I take a unique global perspective on these issues, and the very foundation of my insights is humanity and spirituality. I'm Preity Upala, and welcome to the Preity Experience.
Hi, you're watching Newsx. My name is Vineet Malhotra, and ever since the foreign ministers of India, Japan, Australia and the US have met in Tokyo, China has been visibly very nervous. The Chinese mouthpiece Global Times has been publishing articles which on one hand attempt to villainize the US as the toxic West while trying to downplay the tensions China has with regional powers like Japan, India and Australia. The Chinese mouthpiece says that the US wants a NATO-type alliance in Asia through the Quad, while adding that China has better solutions for the region. China is now trying to project to the world that if the US is looking for a NATO-like alliance in this region, it proves that America's power is dwindling and declining. China has been busy nitpicking the details and the outcome of the Quad foreign ministers meeting, which ended with a common aim to strengthen the Indo-Pacific, and China's response to the same proves that Xi Jinping is rattled by the Quad. We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining me on the panel is Ambassador Deepak Vora. He's joining us from the city of New York, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, is also here with us. Preity Upala, Editor of The Observer. She joins us from the city of Los Angeles, California. She's a geopolitical analyst as well. And last but by no means the least, the loudest voice here, Sumit Peer, political analyst, also joins us on the program. Welcome everyone. It's a Monday here, and I believe in the United States you're still behind when it comes to catching up with India in time, but it seems that Professor Nalapat, China has not been wasting any time. Global Times at it again, downplaying every effort the United States has made, whatever Mike Pompeo has said, whatever the Quad is perhaps aiming for, they're trying to downplay it. Perhaps that's a response, nothing short of nervousness.
There's a very simple rule of thumb, and that rule of thumb is, if there is someone who doesn't like you, somebody who wants you to do badly, and somebody who will be very unhappy if you do well, and that someone basically starts praising you for something you've done, for heaven's sake, you better change that. And if that someone starts attacking you for something you've done, well, I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. The reality of the situation is that the way the Chinese have been going after the Quad, it's very clear they are extremely upset about the prospect of an Asian NATO landing up in the Indo-Pacific. And may I say that they're not alone. You have some European countries also who are extremely short-sighted and myopic, who don't want to let go of the Atlantic century, even after trade, commerce, and capabilities have far outstripped the Atlantic and gone to the Indo-Pacific. And they also would not like to see the Quad take place. The reality is the Quad makes sense for the United States, it makes sense for India, for Japan and for Australia. And the sooner it's operationalized, the better. The more Global Times poo-poos it and the more Global Times criticizes it, it means the more worried the Chinese are about this becoming a reality.
Ambassador Vora, the Quad needs to be powerful. Perhaps we find ourselves on the cusp of a time whereby which the balance of the world is on the verge of a huge transition. But at the same time, Ambassador Vora, do you think that all the other countries who are a part of the Quad, especially Australia, not so much Japan, because they've always had this bone to pick with China, will be as responsive, as aggressive and as ambitious as India is in this project called the Quad?
Thank you very much, Mr. Malhotra, for yet another opportunity to interact and learn from you and all the other colleagues on the panel. It's a bit cold in New York, so forgive me if I'm all trussed up. It's
I can
12
tell.
degrees and raining. So it's pretty cold here, and it's 5:30 in the morning. To answer your question, I've gone through the article in the Global Times. The more frightened, it's been my experience, the Chinese get, the more vituperative, the more vociferous, the more aggressive becomes their media. You know, one of the Indian newspapers also recently carried an editorial telling the Chinese that learn to behave, stop treating the Indian media as though they belong to China. This is very clear, as Professor Nalapat put it brilliantly, that when they start attacking an idea, it means they are frightened of that idea. The center of gravity geopolitically, Mr. Malhotra, we know that for the last 20, 25 years has been shifting from the Atlantic to the Pacific. This is for economic reasons. 3 of the world's 4 largest economies in PPP terms, China, Japan, and India, are in Asia. Only the United States is out there holding up the Western flag. But then the United States has this unique advantage of being on both sides, the Atlantic and the Pacific. So geopolitics states that this will be in many ways a century for Asia, because the United States is going to continue to play a role. Chinese are now scared that they have overplayed their cards and they've played it too early. And now they are very concerned about what they have provoked. Look, the Quad was pretty much moribund. It was on, if I may use the term, marijuana, which is now legal in the United States. But they were sort of sleeping. And suddenly the aggressiveness of China provoked it back into action. The Aussies had joined 2007, then quit. But they had a wonderful relationship with China at that time. The Chinese media responses to Australia, great country, wonderful place, developing very rapidly, and now there's nothing but abuse being hurled on them because they are frightened. So Mr. Ping Pong, or Xi Jinping as you call him, is very, very scared of what is happening right in what he considered his backyard. And the fact that he has provoked this through his actions, this is to something that he understands but refuses to acknowledge, because his own people will then clobber him saying, you are responsible for the reactivation of the Quad. Just one thing in history, so always remember that it's an external trigger that is required to produce tectonic changes. You know, during the Second War, it was the attack on the Soviet Union by Germany. Otherwise, the Soviet Union had no business getting into the war, no interest, but they did when Germany attacked them. And the United States, if I may say so, in the last 2 centuries, I'm sure Professor Nalapat and Ms. Upala and Mr. Peel will bear me out. In the first, in the 20th century, apart from 1 or 2 bomb blasts that took place during the First World War, the Americans really got involved after Pearl Harbor. And America responds with a ferocity that China should be well aware of. Second time happened in 9/11. The Americans bombed Afghanistan out of existence because 2 towers came down in New York and the Pentagon was bombed. It's when their mainland is attacked or when their vital interests are attacked, their fury is unimaginable. The Japanese still remember that fury culminated in a thing called Nagasaki and Hiroshima. When somebody else is hurt, the Americans will take a position. But when they are hurt, they become like a wild beast. And I think this is what is frightening Xi Jinping. So, what is happening today is very, very clear. China has provoked it, China is suffering, and China is running scared.
Right, absolutely, Ambassador. I couldn't agree with you more. Preity, taking a leaf out of that, very interesting vice presidential debate between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, there was a line exchange between the two of them that you are entitled to your own opinion, but not to your own facts. It seems like China has been living in that stratosphere of, having their own facts to share with the world, and that's exactly what Global Times is also doing.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Malhotra, for having me on your show. Yes, indeed, they do live in their own bubble. They actually have been for several decades, for millennia, to be honest. And, when I read this piece in Global Times, it's funny that at the very end, they somehow are providing solutions for how they can normalize their relationship with the rest of the world, with the Quad and the US, and they think that all they have to do is show, the Quad and the US how their own Chinese values are so similar to liberal Western democracies. But we know that it's like night and day. They have, really nothing.
Chalk and cheese. I like to call them chalk and cheese. They never mix.
That's true. And they never learn, I think. And also, unlike India, which has a vibrant, thriving, free press, with China, it's extremely controlled. And now I don't even know if any foreign journalists are allowed since the onset of the Wuhan crisis. So nobody's really reporting anything, and they get to dictate whatever narrative they want to sell to themselves as well as to the rest of the world. Pre-COVID, actually, the world kind of went along with it. And I think this COVID has really been a wake-up call for the world, to see what China is up to. I think one thing that China cannot ignore is this essential conflict between hegemonic power, the US, and this emerging power, the China. Nobody can ignore that. China can't ignore it itself. So it realizes that at some point it does need to, something has to pass.
Preity, the current, before I go to Sumit, I have a question for you. The current friction, the current standoff between the United States and China is more or less seen as a hyperbolic extension of the trade war between China and the United States, which was to a large extent precipitated by the current president, Donald Trump. Do you think all of this perhaps will lie low or calm down if you have a Democratic president? Preity?
Oh, this is for me. I thought it was. No, you know what? Even in the debate, I think this came up in the first debate too. Unfortunately, Democratic parties have always been soft on issues like China, as well as other problems that are a threat to the world at large. And I suspect that if the Democrats were to, get elected, their stance on China will not be tough enough. They do not really understand the depth of, what the threat that China poses, not just to the US, but its allies. And even though Kamala Harris made a point that the US has abandoned their allies and been in bed with their adversaries, that's exactly what her party is going to do, sadly. They have a record of doing that, and India is one of their allies who has been kicked to the curb, so to speak. So I dread foreign policy if the Democrats come into power. They won't be holding China accountable. Hunter Biden, candidate Biden's son, has had quite a record being, receiving large sums of money from Chinese companies, as well as the one
Preity,
in Ukraine.
you might just have
conflict of interest.
You might just have given away whom you're voting for, but nevertheless, Sumit, coming to you now. It seems that whatever we read, whatever this Global Times talks about, it does not sound like something which is perhaps neutral in nature. It has a heavy inkling of what the CCP is all about. Is there a danger, in these reports, which are in fact circulated all around the world? We keep talking about the articles and the narrative that the Global Times pushes, but the authenticity of it, the role of the CCP behind it is also something that needs to be talked about and exposed. Sumit?
Vineet, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. Global Times, in your show once before, I called it the Chanda Mama, because they write the stories, they write the CCP stories. They write the stories which the Xi Jinping likes to wake up in the morning and read. And before going to night, he wants to read another story. That's exactly what CCP writes. And these stories are sold to 1.5 billion Chinese and telling them, look how great we are, how great Xi is, how great communism is, and how we are going to rattle and win the world for you. Don't ask questions, just read Global Times, be happy, keep on dreaming, you'll get good night dreams, and that is what will, and tomorrow will give you a new story. So that is what Global Times is all about. It is the official mouthpiece of CCP with an unofficial tag. That is where it stands right now. Now, besides propaganda and propagating a Chinese narrative, today I saw a video in which they were saying some Chinese soldiers doing an exercise. Now, which soldiers in the world do not do a military exercise? I wrote back to them, I say, is it monkey circus? That is what exactly this is. What are you trying to propagate? What are you trying to show to the world? Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? propaganda is fine, this lobbying is fine, but if you cross all the limits of absurdity, your name is Global Times. That's what Global Times is. The fact of the matter is that Xi Jinping forced the world to get together, and he is the person who forced the Quad to come into the picture. Now, what is Quad? Quad is the alliance of Indo-Pacific democracies. All the powerful democracies in Indo-Pacific and across the world will be aligning: US, Japan, Australia. Now, if you look at the GDP of these people put together, it is much, much bigger than the Chinese GDP put together. Now, you will see more of the countries, and I think Indonesia, Malaysia, and some other Asian countries might align, like Philippines also, who have been bullied by China. So, what has Xi Jinping achieved? Nothing. He has forced the world to form this alliance. Now, what does this alliance mean? This alliance means end game for Chinese aggression. This alliance means end game for China to take over the world. This alliance means end game for China to be the superpower of Asia. Forget the world now. So the Chinese dominance, this 50 years CCP plan by 2050 will be ruling the world, will be the most powerful economy, most powerful army. All these have been shattered. Now people of China possibly realize this, and what is Global Times giving them? Global Times is giving them a twinkle twinkle little star in the evening, and next day morning it's again giving them a Baba black sheep. So look at it, be happy, nothing is going to happen. India is afraid, US is afraid, Japan is afraid, everybody is afraid except Xi Jinping and China. So we are the superpower, don't worry about it, but we have been halted in India and in Ladakh for 5 months. We have been counting mountain rats there. So PLA is doing duck hunting there. So, but don't worry, we are great. We are going to make you through. That is what it is about. It is the emergence of the alliance of democracies, and Vinith, Quad will not be only about military. We can also have an economic alliance with it. We can have different kinds of alliance. I'll call it a super NATO of Asia. Why to relate it to NATO? That is only military alliance. Why can't Quad go much beyond NATO? Economic, cultural, military, all kinds of things can happen because we are natural partners. We are all democracies, and we are up against the autocratic China, which is a threat to the world peace. The most eminent threat to the world peace today is China. The world has realized that. So this is what is ratted. Have they created their own Frankenstein? Yes, the answer is yes. Xi Jinping did not get China what they wanted, but he has made sure that China is halted and put within a box. And Quad is one of the first steps that has happened, and I'm very sure many more are on the way, Vinith. The ball has started rolling. Many more things are going to come.
Right. Professor Nalapat, could this be analogous to, perhaps a cat closing its eyes when it senses danger? Because China has not fought a war in the last 40 years. And the last time it was indulged in a conflict, a military conflict with any country, they cut China to size. All of this propaganda that we see, all of this disinformation, this misinformation which is coming out of China, is this a giveaway, especially for India, that the pressure, the aggression that we have responded with, and the kind of involvement and seriousness that we have shown for the Quad is working?
Well, Vinith, I would take the Chinese military capabilities very, very seriously. I would not downplay them at all. But the reality is the Chinese would like to see NATO involved in Asia. They would, the Sino-Russian alliance has taken the measure of NATO. They have seen NATO basically surrender on its knees in Afghanistan. They have seen NATO completely flounder in Libya. They have seen NATO, looking at sixes and sevens in Iraq. So they have no problem with NATO coming into Asia because they know the Europeans, are not welcome in Asia in the first place. And secondly, that they are not able to fight on the ground. So they would be very happy if NATO comes into Asia. They are worried about Asian countries coming together with the United States and forming an Asian NATO. Not NATO, but maybe North America Asia Treaty Organization, NAATO. They are terrified of that, and especially India. They do not want India to be part of this kind of an Asian alliance. So they are working individually and collectively to try and prevent the different countries in Asia from coming together into a security alliance. In India, they are relying very heavily on the Russians and on various other groups to ensure that India will not join in formalizing the Quad. So far, I'm sorry to say, they don't seem to have done too badly. I mean, we are still some way from formalizing the Quad. But the reality is that they are terrified of the Asian countries first uniting and two coming together in a military alliance analogous to NATO in Europe, but different from NATO in the sense this is going to be North America and Asia, and the other was North America and Europe, which are two entirely different things.
Ambassador Vora, first up, obviously what Professor Nalapat said makes absolute sense, that China is always testing waters. It's always testing bodies, it's testing countries, it's testing agencies, it's testing people, and now people are testing themselves because of what China has done to the world, so to speak. But at the same time, do you think that the bubble that China was perhaps living in is slowly bursting, and it's perhaps this this realization that's dawning upon them, which is making them flutter and perhaps wince in pain and come out with these ridiculous claims through various platforms?
Professor Madhav Nalapat got it absolutely right, that they are rattled, they are scared, and this NAATO, which is a new formulation, thank you, Professor Nalapat, is emerging. We can see the contours. I just wanted to comment on Mr. Sumit Peer saying, Baba, black sheep. Yes, it is the black sheep, Mr. Peer. I don't know if you intended to mean that. It is the black sheep of the world today, and we've all seen that they have no guts. Forget the wool, they have no guts at all. Absolutely, Mr. Malhotra, the reality is they are frightened, they are rattled, they are disoriented. If you read the statements that are coming out, at times it's conciliatory, at times it's threatening, but overall the tone is that we don't really know what's happening. We have unleashed forces in the Asia Pacific that we are now unable to control. This seems to be the dominating mood at the moment in China, including with Mr. Ping Pong, who controls everything. You have unleashed forces, you have created circumstances that might conspire against you. Of course, the thing about an emerging power challenging an established power, the famous Thucydides trap, is all there. But more than that, sir, I think China has also fallen into the Caligula trap 2,000 years ago. The Roman emperor, when told that everybody hated him for his cruelty, responded, let them hate me as long as they fear me. I'm afraid
and Ambassador Vora, he also appointed his horse as a minister.
That's correct. I mean, the Chinese, everybody in Xi Jinping's inner circle is either, forgive me, he's either an ass or another animal that is mute, because all they do is nod like this to whatever he says. If he says the sun is green, they'll nod in agreement and say, wow, what amazing perceptiveness this character has. So really, the reality here is very, very simple, that this country is in trouble. So please make no mistake about it. I'll conclude very quickly. The latest Wuhan figures that have come out from the World Health Organization, 10% of the world, 780 million, and Italian, American, and Indian doctors have confirmed you might be cured of the virus, but the subsequent after effects, cardiovascular, neurological, hepatologic, renal, I mean, there are all kinds of diseases that are coming up that they are now noticing. But 1/10 of the world's population, which is an understatement, probably half, the Chinese will never be able to live this down. Sir, mark my words, I will not be around probably in 10, 15, 20 years from now. But some of these fellows in China will be paying for crimes against humanity. This is also what they are extremely worried about, sir.
Absolutely. And Preity, the United States plays a pivotal role when it comes to shaping not only world policy against China, but its own policy towards China has seen a paradigm shift in the last few months, especially after COVID-19. The momentum that has been gained hopefully will not be broken, will not be disrupted, regardless of who the president is. But going by the overtures that the United States has made towards China, was the response adequate? Do you think China has fallen for that? Have they been petrified of what the US has done, especially in South China Sea with the trade barriers and other bans which have been imposed, especially TikTok and other applications? Do you think China has responded to that, or is it just acting that it doesn't matter to them?
Well, I think it's realized that the US obviously is leading this charge against them, and is also the driving force behind the Quad, getting together the Asian powers, so to speak, to sort of counter them. I don't personally think that the US and President Trump has been firm enough. I think this is the most powerful country in the world. They could wipe out any other nation, so to speak, if they wanted to. They could really be much more firmer and hold them much more accountable and sort of punish them, which I don't think they have. But, President Trump might depending on the election, but he might have a few tricks up his sleeve, and he might be, pacing himself. And I hope that's the case. I would like to see the greatest superpower really act like one, because this would be the time, if any, where they can really show their prowess and show the world as an example of a leader, who is a responsible, mature nation, and will hold the other accountable. But I think, Secretary Pompeo obviously realizes how important the Quad is vis-a-vis China and what's happening in the Indo-Pacific and the South China seas. Obviously during COVID, so many events have been canceled, the campaign rallies have been canceled, and even after President Trump contracted corona himself. But the one trip that Secretary Pompeo did not cancel was his trip to Tokyo to meet with the members of the Quad, because he realized how important it was to get together the great liberal democracies of the world. I must say it's really international at this point, and what they need to do to counter China. But I think the important thing is that some steps have been taken. You got to start somewhere. And I think it's going to get more intense as things go on. This standoff between India and China is not going away anytime soon. It will escalate, it will get more intense. And I think that's when the US can also play a more pivotal role in standing by its allies, as it should, and really showing China who's the boss. Because at the end of the day, this is a proxy power game between China and the US. And I guess we happen to fall in the midst of all of this, but we are a very pivotal part of the puzzle. It's sort of geopolitical musical chair, so to speak. But I'd like the US to beef up more, I think, in its attack, to be quite honest, against China.
Okay, Sumit, you can obviously get all the biggies on your side. You can have the big fishes, come up with alliances and quads. But at the same time, what do you do about the little countries who are dependent on China, who have a problem with China, but they can't say too much? They need the support, they need the help. Should there be alliance of countries, big powers such as India and the US and Australia and other developed nations to come together and help, give them the help that perhaps China has promised them? Cut that umbilical cord from that aspect as well.
I think, Vineet, it's a question of making a poll. When you make the poll, the electrodes align. That is what is going to happen. Today, they only have an option of China. There is no other power or a group of people who is going to help them out. Now, with this Quad shaping, that's why I said Quad can be much bigger than a military alliance. Economic, socio-political, it can be a much bigger alliance, because for the world, peace is imminent to have a power which can put China in its own place. Now, these countries, one of our shows I answered that, let's say, for example, if you talk of the medicines, India can be the pharmacy of the world. Now, if you talk of cars, let's say one more country comes and he supplies the cars. There are not more than 20 products which China supplies to the whole of the world. And if these countries get together and the alliance becomes bigger and one country comes up with one good product, let's say, for example, India is medicine, somebody else comes with cars, somebody else comes with chemicals. So like this, we can create an economic alternate to China. And the most important point is, we need economically, it will be a super power. And militarily, if you look at the military ratings, India and US put together is an invincible force. Xi Jinping, in his dreams, and after being bombed for 7 times again, cannot think of beating this alliance. This will become invincible. And that is what we want for our security and prosperity for our future generations to come. We have to become invincible. That is very important right now.
All right. Sumit, thank you so much for concluding that on a high note, not so much so for Xi Jinping, but nevertheless, thank you everyone for being a part of this debate. We slip into a short break. See you on the other side.